What's up guys, Readiness Reviews back with you again. At last, we are in the final stages of bringing my Royal Tiger Imports No.4 Mk.1 rifle back to life. If you missed the first couple videos on this rifle, I'll go ahead and link them right here. This rifle was purchased from Royal Tiger Imports. It was imported from Inner Ordnance out of Africa, and it came extremely dirty on the inside, and it was also missing several parts and was sort of broken. They were sold at a discounted price because of that, so they needed a little bit of work to get up and running. I think we're finally making it to the end here. In shipping, the rear front handguard was broken along with the rear sight. Now, I considered trying to repair this handguard, but this chunk of wood was blown out. That wouldn't be that hard to fix. The cracks in it, though, are pretty severe. It has two cracks. You can see them there. The larger of which runs pretty much the full length of the handguard. There's a hairline crack that runs all the way to the end here. Now this is repairable, and at some point I am going to attempt to make that repair, but at the moment my skills in wood repair, especially wood this thin, is not up to par to do a proper repair on this where it can withstand recoil. Luckily, No.4 rifle parts are not that hard to source. I had to buy rifle parts from 3 or 4 different websites. I managed to find a replacement handguard directly from Century Arms. This was only about $8, I think it was. The issue with this is, though, this is a beechwood front handguard, I believe, and the original is something else. It's either maple or walnut or something like that. It's a darker wood. So of course, this handguard won't match the wood on the rifle. The wood for this rifle has a very red tint to it. Now the two handguards are a lot darker. That's going to be from oils they've absorbed from handling over the years, whereas the wood on the stock itself is a little bit lighter. It all has a nice red tinge to it. In hopes of matching the colors up a little bit, I'm actually going to stain this beechwood handguard. I wasn't exactly sure what color of stain to use because I don't know exactly what wood this is or if whatever wood this is has been stained in the past. So I did a couple little testing on the inside here. You can see some darker blotches. I wiped most of it off so it didn't really stick. I checked a walnut. I thought that was a little bit too dark of a color, and then I actually checked a mahogany. And that mahogany gave a nice red color to it. I believe that's going to match up fairly well. Of course, being a different type of wood, it's never going to look exactly the same, but I will give it the best shot that I can. I have some Minwax penetrating stain here. This is red mahogany number 225. I have used this before when I refinished a desk, and it looks quite nice. The handguard itself did not fit the rifle when I first got it. It was extremely tight when I was placing it under the little retaining ring here. And it still does. It has a spring tension. It doesn't sit flat on the rifle like the original handguard does. This one just sits straight down. This one has a little bit of a gap in it. It's under tension there. So I might have to do some more sanding on it, but for now I think it's good enough. This is a new old stock handguard, and it's meant to be specifically fitted to the rifle it's gonna go on. So it's a little bit oversized in pretty much every dimension. I took off a couple thousandths on the bottom side to get it to fit a little better. Other than that, I didn't really do much to it, so it might still need a little bit of sanding, but we're gonna go with it for right now. I'm gonna put this stain on fairly thick. This is the stain rag I use. It's actually an old pair of underwear. These have never been worn, by the way. As soon as they were pulled out of the pack, they were put into stain duty, and they've stained all kinds of stuff in the past. You can do this by hand, but I want to try to avoid getting as much on my hands as possible, although it's gonna happen. So we'll get a little bit of our stain on our cloth here. This cloth really soaks it up. This is not necessarily the best way to do it, but for the sake of being a little less messy, this is the way I'm doing it. And we'll just paint that on fairly thick. And right away, you can see that color. It's looking a lot like the forestock on the rifle. It's not nearly as dark as the original handguard was, but oh man, is that looking good. I've heard in the past that beechwood doesn't really hold stain that well, but this is looking fantastic already. Look at that. That just soaked it right up. Look at how close those are. It's almost a perfect match. I didn't think the red mahogany was gonna look quite that good, but that is looking absolutely fantastic. When I'm staining wood, what I usually do is I put on a coat like that. I let it sit and dry for maybe 20-30 minutes, and then I come behind that and I wipe off the excess, and then I'll do another coat if it is required. I've given that some time to soak in a little bit and dry. It is looking pretty good. I'm gonna take a part of the rag that hasn't been used for stain and just give it a quick wipe off to take off any excess. That way I can really get a good look at it to see what I think. Even though that is looking good, I think it would benefit from at least one more coat. I'll put it on a little thicker this time. Since it's already soaked some in, it's not going to be quite as absorbent as it was before. Oh yeah, that's really darkening up nicely. Wow, now that is a pretty piece of wood. So I'll do the same thing with this one more time. Let it dry, come by and wipe it down, and then we'll see what it's looking like. I think it's going to be done after this coat though. While our second coat of stain is drying, we'll start taking a look at replacing some of the other parts this rifle was missing. So the reason I haven't been able to shoot it yet is because the bolt was missing the cocking piece. It was also missing the extractor spring and the cocking piece screw. So I sourced the extractor spring, which is a very small little piece there, from Sarco. I was able to find the cocking piece and the cocking piece screw from Century Arms. Now, I've never replaced a No. 4 extractor spring before, but I was looking at this trying to see how it works. The cocking piece itself has a little ball detent on it, and there is a matching detent on the bolt head. So I'm guessing this just slides in and snaps into place. It's going to be under spring tension, so it's probably not going to be easy. Things like this are always more difficult than they should be. But I will just press on that and see if it will snap in. Apply some pressure with my table here. And it did fill up that gap down there at the bottom, so I think it's pretty much in there. This is the actual little extractor piece, and it goes in between the spring and the bolt head. That is an extremely tight spring though, so I think I'm going to need some assistance to hold it while I try to insert the other piece here. For this part, I've enlisted the help of my little vise here. So we'll vise the bolt head down. If you don't have a vise, this is more of a freehand job, I'd say. And it's pretty secure. So I've tried putting these in separately several times. I'm gonna try sliding them in at the same time and see if that helps at all. So I'm gonna kind of stack them up. Start it with the spring, and then try to push the extractor in with it, and maybe that'll allow it to go in there. This is a fairly difficult part to deal with. Maybe it's just my inexperience, but it's looking like we can push it all down in there. Well, I didn't hear any snaps or anything, so it's not like it snapped in, but both pieces are in there. I think the spring needs to go down just a little bit more, so I'm going to give it a couple taps with a punch and a hammer to try to seat it in there fully. That's got it pretty well bottomed out. See if it has spring tension. It does. All right, now we got to see if the extractor hole lined up with the appropriate hole in the bolt head. And it is down a little bit further than it should be, but that should be easy to realign. There it is, just needed a little push forward. That was not super easy to replace, but with the vise, I was able to do it fairly easily. Just slide it both in there at the same time and then line everything up. I think that's about the way it should be. And then all this is just simply held in with one little screw. I've never inspected one of these up close, but that's looking like it should work. So that's one piece down. Hopefully that was the most difficult part. Everything from here is pretty straightforward. We're pretty much just putting the bolt back together. So I got a little cocking piece screw and the cocking piece itself. Make sure these fit like a glove. Lee-Enfield bolts are super simple. That's the main bolt spring. It just goes down into the bolt body, which otherwise doesn't have anything in it. You have your rather large firing pin that's threaded on the end. That goes down inside the spring there. The threaded part comes out the back end here. To properly take the Enfield bolt down, you need one of these special bolt wrenches. I also picked this up from Sarco. I think it was about $13 or $15, something like that. And I have several Enfields, so it's actually worth it to me to have this wrench so I can work on several different guns. Push the bolt down under spring tension and start screwing the cocking piece just to get the thread started. Once that starts threading and it can hold spring tension, this can be inverted again. Insert your little wrench until it seats home inside of the firing pin. And then you can just start screwing it all in. You'll feel it getting tighter and tighter. There's the end of the firing pin starting to make its way out of the end of the cocking piece there. We'll actually pull this and cock it. Give that another turn or two. The end of that bolt is keyed to line up with the round portion of the cocking piece there. And that's where your cocking screw goes in and holds it all together. We're just going to screw this in. Feeling a little bit of resistance, but that's okay. It's a nice tight fit. That's in there far enough for me. I'm not trying to force anything or strip anything out. Let's try cocking it and decocking it a couple times. All that seems to be together properly. Then it's just as simple as screwing this bolt head in. And that is a No. 4 bolt. My first time assembling one. All of these pieces were fairly inexpensive. The rifle itself was $250. After shipping and everything, it ended up being like $287. For a No. 4, that's a pretty good price. Of course, it needed work done. So after I've bought all the parts for it and all that, the total cost at the moment is $335. We'll try to insert our bolt here. The Enfield bolt head should have a little bit of slop in it because it has to fold down into this little crevice. And we depress our plunger and push it the rest of the way down. The bolt slides forward. And there it is, completely cocked. Now, the tag on this rifle said that the trigger was broken. I think it is finally time to see whether or not that trigger is actually broken. Let's give that trigger a little squeeze and see if it fires. Bang! I think we have a functional rifle. Let's go ahead and cycle that again. Oh yeah, that awesomely smooth and fast Lee-Enfield cock on close action. This baby is almost range ready. It has been several days while I was waiting for the final pieces of the rifle to come in. I ended up giving this front handguard 2 more coats of the stain, and I've given it plenty of time to cure, and it's nice and dry now. The final color is an extremely good match for the 4-stock. However, as I figured it would be, it's not quite as dark as the original handguard was. One of the major things on this rifle that was wrong with it is the rear sight was broken. This is that rear sight that came on it from Royal Tiger Imports. It was broken shipping. There was a corresponding hole in the box that lined up with the aperture for the sight there, and there's the piece of the sight that we lost that was broken. So I did source a new old stock sight. It's a Mark III rear sight, just like the one I'm replacing. However, it has an electro penciled 4 on there. So I don't know if it's like updated to a Mark IV. It is a pretty much 100% match. They're both stamped sights. I found this on gunpartscorp.org. It was $20. I think that's a pretty good deal. It's unfortunate that I had to spend that extra $20. That could have been avoided by using a little bit better packaging for the shipping, but it is what it is. I still have my other original sight installation hardware that we're going to use. It's been a little while since I've actually taken this sight off, so I'm going to have to remember how to put it back on as I go. Now there is a hole here that this spring goes in, and then there is a plunger that gives the sight spring tension. And this thing is basically just pinned on. No screws or anything. I elevated the rifle on a shooting rest just so we can get a little bit better of a look. So getting this started is going to be the hardest part because we're fighting spring tension to do so. We'll push this plunger down some and start our pin through. And then we have to place our tiny little washer on the pin. That washer actually has a flat bottom that meets up against the plunger. Going to depress that plunger with my punch just a little bit here to loosen everything up. All right, now that that is started, it's going to become quite a bit easier. Or it should anyway. Because now we just take our rear sight. There's the aligning holes that the pin goes through. Wedge it in there. It's quite tight, but it needs to be. And then we just depress that to further depress the plunger. And when it lines up, we should be able to stick the pin through. And we got it through one side. And then we'll just try to go ahead and slide it through the other side. And there it is, snapped right into place. Did a quick zoom here just so we can see what we're working with. We have to turn this until we can align the hole that's in the pin with the notch that's cut out here in the sight base for the receiver. And then we have the tiniest little pin. That's it in the palm of my hand. Slides into that hole, and that's what holds it all into place. There it is, poking up just a little bit, and we'll tap that in with our punch. And that's seated in. There we can see the pin went all the way through the other pin, and there's a little recess in there for it. That is our rear sight installation. I am getting excited now because we are getting there. So we have our aperture for the rear sight. The aperture that raises up and slides up and down works. The spring in that is good. I believe the battle sight on this is set at 200 meters. Now let's get the rest of this bad boy back together. Everything from this point forward should be extremely easy. We're basically just taking our rear handguard, fitting it into the retention ring, and seating this down. I did do a little bit more sanding on it, so it's a little bit better of a fit now. We take our front handguard and pop it right onto place where it's supposed to line up at. All the parts diagrams I've looked at have had the screws facing in different directions. The majority of them have had them coming in for the left though, so that's the way I'm going to do this. If that is incorrect, just let me know in the comments, and I will definitely fix that. This barrel band's a little bit bent up. It was like that when I got it. Coming from Africa, it actually had a little canvas or paper spacer in it. So I might have to put something in this later on to fill in some empty space, but I'll find that out after we get it back together. We'll turn this over on its side. It's feeling like it's going to be pretty tight to me. Screw just goes through with our sling swivel, and that very simply screws into the other side. Even though this barrel band was in pretty rough condition and I could have got a replacement for not a lot of money, I wanted to keep the rifle as original as I could. And that's pretty well tightened down, and our sling loop can still move back and forth. Now we have to put our front barrel band on. I'll screw it in from the left as well, just so everything matches up. It's very important that you don't have your front handguard actually touching the front sight. Supposedly that can cause harmonic issues and affect the accuracy of the rifle. So you want it to be back just a little bit so you can see the barrel between the handguard and your front sight block. Just screwing this in, tightening everything down. That's pretty well tight. Let's make sure nothing is moving. Yeah, everything seems cinched down real good. Last major part to replace is our front sight protector. That very simply just slides right onto the front sight there. There's a corresponding hole that the screw goes through, and screw that one in. You got that cinched down nice and tight. That seems quite solid. And that is our completed No. 4 rifle. Finally back together. Been through a lot on this one. We went through the full conservation and restoration process of de-rusting the metal, caring for the wood. We matched up that handguard and it is almost a perfect match to the bottom wood. We have all of our parts back on there. In the downtime I had between filming the parts of this video, I actually managed to pick up an original sling for it. My rifle is a 1944 dated BSA Shirley, and I managed to find a 1944 dated khaki Enfield sling. I got this from IMA. They had a hand select option, and on that hand select option, I requested a 1944, and they actually sent me one. I was pretty stoked about that. Let's finish off putting everything together with the installation of a sling. Now, you can see the discoloration where this sling's previous rifle had it, so that's where I'm going to have the sling sitting at. This just slides through the sling swivel up the front, and I'll bring that down to where it aligns with the old spot where it used to be on its old rifle. You can even see the little impression down here where the clip used to be, and that's where I will clip it on. The Enfield sling takes a little bit of finagling, but it gets in there. And our little clip just goes over the canvas like that. So we got the front end. Let's do the rear. Same thing on the rear. You can see the discoloration where it used to be on the old sling loop and where it used to latch onto it. So we're going to try to line all that up. There's some more markings on this part of the sling, but you can't really make them out. Heck yeah. So now we really have a completed No. 4. Now that I've went through all this, getting it back together, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to finally pull the trigger on it. So let's get this guy out to the range. All right, so we have our No. 4 Mk.1 Grade C rifle from Royal Tiger Imports. Since putting the stain on it, I have waxed it to give it more of that original feel. And the color match is decent. You can tell it's not 100%, but it looks pretty good. And we should be ready to go. Let's go ahead and load this up and see if we can hit anything with it. So I have a couple different varieties of 303 ammo here. This first one is Wolf, steel cased. And that loaded in nicely. I did stagger these rounds to avoid rim lock. Depending on the ammo, you may or may not have to do that. This is pretty partisan on this clip, so we'll start out with brass cased. It's always a little harder to get that second one in there, but we have 10 rounds in the rifle. The battle side of this rifle is 200 meters. We're only shooting at about 50 yards, so I'm going to be taking a 6 o'clock hold and hopefully we'll hit something. So if I take my time and actually get my breathing and trigger squeeze right, it's pretty much dead on at this distance on steel. I did have a couple misses there, but that was just all me jerking it. I think I ended up with a pretty decent shooter, to tell you the truth. So we are back at the review table. Range day with this gun was a ton of fun. Given all that this rifle has been through over the course of its life, it really is one of my projects that I'm most proud of. getting it back up and running. I know none of the stuff that we had to fix was really major work, and I'm completely satisfied with how it turned out. The bore on this rifle looked decent when I first got it, but after taking it out and shooting on a couple of separate occasions, I brought it back and cleaned it each time, and now the bore is looking outstanding, especially in comparison to the other offerings I've seen from Royal Tiger Imports. I got really lucky with the bore condition on this rifle, I think. This rifle has literally been all over the world. There's no telling what it has seen in its time on this planet. Of course, it was made in England at BSA Shirley. One of my viewers pointed out that it has a screw running through the stock here. That's what's called an Ishi bolt. Ishi short for Ishapur, which is the rifle factory that produced Enfield rifles in India, meaning that at some point this rifle saw some kind of service in India. After its Indian service, that's probably when it made its way to Ethiopia. In Africa, no telling what it went through while it was there. And then eventually Interordnance got their hands on them and brought them back over to the US for us to buy and enjoy these fantastic rifles. I'm so glad that I was able to conserve this awesome little piece of history, and hopefully now it'll be around and operational for many more generations to come. This was an extremely long video, guys. If you stuck around with me through this, thank you so very much. I truly appreciate that. Hopefully it wasn't too boring and you found it to be helpful in some way, or at the very least entertaining. Thank you so much for checking the video out. If you liked it, hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel, because I intend to continue producing content like this in the future. Let me know what you thought about the video down in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. See you then. Peace.